and welcome to Conversations with Agents of Change, the podcast where we speak with people who are challenging old systems, creating new possibilities, and helping shape a more sustainable future. Today, I'm delighted to welcome Adrian Curry. Adrian has spent decades in the glass industry, including many years of leading Encircle, and is now chair of Glass Futures, an organization helping the global glass and foundation industries innovate, decarbonize, and rethink how materials are made, used, and reused. What I found fascinating about Adrian's story is that this is not only a conversation about glass, it's a conversation about industrial transformation. It is about how traditional sectors change, how innovation happens at scale, how competitors collaborate, and how sustainability can move from being a compliant issue to becoming a source of value. So, Adrian, welcome to Conversations with Agents of Change.
Thank you, Izzy. Delighted to be here.
For listeners who might not know your story, could you tell us a little about your journey and the glass industry and what first drew you into that sector?
I suppose, like all things, Izzy, it was a bit of luck and a bit of opportunity and being young and enthusiastic. I went to university in the University of Ulster, Jordanstown. I studied electrical and electronic engineering. I didn't finish my course. Myself, the university, and my bank manager agreed it wasn't a good idea. I was never the most academic person in that respect, but always had a huge curiosity and liked to get hands-on involved in things. So when I left university, I went to work for a company in County Fermanagh, Northern Ireland, called the Sean Quinn Group. And at this stage, the Quinn Group was a really fascinating venture. I mean, it was growing at a rate of knots. Sean Quinn had founded the business in 1970. And when I joined back in 1995, the business had grown considerably in that 25 years, and he had started off with sand and gravel and diversified into many different types of businesses. Most of the businesses were linked to the core sand and gravel that was available in the local area in Derry Lynn in County Fermanagh. But from that, Sean Quinn had built quite a large conglomerate of different businesses. So he was manufacturing concrete products, manufacturing cement, owned pubs and hotels. And later the business continued to grow into other areas like insurance and properties all around the world, and became quite a large company, certainly in Northern Ireland terms, but even beyond that. But at the time when I joined the business, initially I was working in the garage, servicing trucks and vehicles. And I really loved that, and probably to this day it was one of my fondest memories of working in a really great team of people that were servicing a lot of these trucks, 100 more trucks on the road, quarry equipment, all of this. But I was asked to go to a project which was building a new lightweight building block factory in the local area owned by Sean Quinn. So myself and another guy were the first two people on the ground, really, and we were very hands-on, working with the construction guys, installing the equipment, starting up the plant. And that gave me a real thirst for manufacturing and taking the skills that I'd learned as a mechanic and the engineering skills from university and turning them into skills that could create something that makes something. And that's really just a very interesting space for me over the years, and I've enjoyed it quite a lot. So we built this factory, and we were starting it up. Got it up and running. It was a tough enough project, as most of these kind of projects are. But Sean Quinn then one day said to me, "I'm going to get involved in glass. Would you like to be part of the team?" I was 24, 25. I said, "Absolutely, I would love to, Sean. What kind of glass?" And he goes, "Well, we have to decide what that is. We have sand, we have limestone, we have money. We're prepared to invest and take a risk. So let's see." So that was how I started on the glass journey, really. So that was 1995, 1996. So we're talking 30 years ago now at this stage. And very quickly, there was a team of 4, maybe 5 of us. And we started to look at the different options for making glass in County Fermanagh. And very quickly, we realized that the main option was making glass bottles. And that was predominantly because the market was good and growing. There was only one company making glass bottles in Ireland at the time. And they had a lot of underinvestment, some union issues. The location in the centre of Dublin wasn't a great location for manufacturing. So very quickly, Sean in particular, and the rest of us led by him, decided that this was probably the best opportunity to manufacture glass from locally available sand and limestone. And in some ways, to say the rest is history, but there was quite a lot of developments along the way, a lot of challenges, opportunities. We built the factory and we commissioned the factory back in 1998. And I think at the time we spent something like £100 million in the factory, including startup costs. So it was a huge investment at the time. Our competitor in Ireland realized that we were coming along, couldn't do a lot about it. Arguably, if they had have decided that they would have built a new factory, maybe in a different location just outside of Dublin, it would have been more competitive than ours and we wouldn't have continued with the project. But at the time they didn't. We built our factory, they eventually closed their factory, and we were supplying all of Ireland and supplying glass into England. So probably at this stage, this was probably about 1999, 2000. So as a team, we thought we'd done a great job. We had built this factory. We'd eventually turned it into profit. We had taken on the market. We'd established ourselves as a good quality supplier, and our competitor had gone away. So I think for most people, that would be job well done and move on. But Quinn, being Quinn at the time, said we've really cost ourselves a lot of money. We've learned a lot. You guys are a fairly young team. We're going to go again. And this was the first venture that the business had off outside of the island of Ireland. So it was, how do we grow? Where do we make this challenge into a big opportunity for us? So we looked at various options, but we decided to build a large factory in England, in Cheshire. And at that point then we were designing the factory, thinking what we would make, talking to customers. And really the direction from Sean Quinn at the time was make it the biggest factory with the lowest cost that you possibly can. So this is where I kind of started to learn about disruption, innovation, how you turn these things into opportunities. You know, at the time it was all about efficiency. Today we would call it sustainability, whether that's economic sustainability or environmental sustainability. So we went out and we looked at how we could really bring opportunities to this big plant that we were going to build. So we decided to build the largest furnaces in the world, which today, I mean, the factory was commissioned in 2004, so the furnaces are still the largest furnaces in the world.
Wow.
We brought in new technology. At the time, all the glass players would make one bottle at a time, two, or even three bottles at a time. We brought in technology where we could make four at a time. That was a quantum leap. We bought 13 machines with this capability, 13 very large manufacturing machines. We also built a huge automated warehouse, which had never been done in the industry. And then we had the idea of filling bottles with liquid on the same site. So that could be soft drinks, it could be beer, it could be wine, spirits, you name it. And again, this was never done before and arguably since. So the factory built in 2004 was a real state-of-the-art factory at the time. £325 million spent. It was one of the largest factories ever built in the world. It was the only factory in the world built with large furnaces, automated warehousing, and filling capacity. So again, this is something that probably sparked something in me going, okay, I like manufacturing. I like to make something. If you make it on scale, you can take out a lot of inefficiencies. You can make it more sustainable. And obviously the proposition then to the customers in the marketplace was much better. I mean, we were unchallenged when it came to costs, being able to grow the market. So really that's how I got into the glass industry. And yeah, 30 years on, as you say, I'm chair of Glass Futures and still very involved in the glass industry. I'm on the board of a glass maker in California, and I'm involved in other things that are all related to the glass industry. So yeah, glass is very much in my DNA at this stage.
That's such an interesting journey. And when you were saying all this, I was just wondering, how has the industry changed since you started? Like, have you seen like big changes?
I would say some changes. What we did as Quinn Glass, and which later became Insert, the business, we brought a lot of disruption to the industry. Whenever we built our factory in Ireland, I told you the story, but the factory in England was a similar situation where our competitors were underinvested, weren't using the best technology available. And really, when we came along, we pushed them one side. So at the time, there was a lot of challenge within that, a lot of consternation within the industry. So the industry challenged our planning permission. They fought us in the courts. They tried everything to stop the construction of this factory. We actually continued to build the factory when our planning permission was rescinded. We had to get a new planning application to get it passed. And this was all really our competitors causing all this tension. I mean, supermarkets tend to do it to each other, but it was the first time really that large industry, certainly in the UK, was was doing this. So I suppose, Izzy, my takeaway from that is that we were disruptive. We were investing a lot of money. We were doing the right thing by the industry and growing a business that was indigenous. But the competition saw that as a challenge, and their response was to fight us in the courts, cause a public inquiry, cause all sorts of things, which it took us a long time to resolve those issues and did distract us somewhat. Equally, we probably would never have built the factory as quickly if we hadn't had these challenges. So there's a plus and a minus in it. But I suppose that brought a frustration for me as well, that the industry wasn't moving forward. And the industry tends to move forward incrementally rather than big change. And I guess that's why Glass Futures is very appealing as well, because we're trying to do things out of the box. The industry is a global industry. It's relatively small in terms of the number of players. The two biggest players have suffered a lot of financial problems over the years. So that means that there's no natural leader in the industry in terms of technology and developing new ways of making glass. So with the insert plant in Cheshire and the one in Northern Ireland, we were certainly seen as challengers, disruptors, and doing things in different ways. And that is hugely exciting. And that's something that the industry globally needs to do today.
Absolutely. And what I hear is that glass is not just a product, as you said, it's part of a much bigger system. And the materials, the energy, the manufacturing, the transport, the brands, the customers, and the regulations. And that makes this conversation so interesting because when we talk about transforming glass, we're really talking about transforming an entire industrial ecosystem. And I'm very excited about that. So there's a lot of conversation about packaging and plastic and recycling and circularity. But why do you believe that glass still has such an important role to play in a more sustainable future?
I mean, there's a lot of topics there that you mentioned that we can unpack. So as leading a large glass manufacturing business, I was speaking very often to large customers. Um, Consumers tend to like glass, and all surveys say that consumers like glass. But the decision makers, to a large extent, are the brand owners and the retailers,
Mhm.
because they want cost out, cost out. And glass has had a lot of disadvantage in terms of cost. So really, when I was CEO in the glass maker, I was very much looking at how we take cost out, how we decarbonize, and how we position glass for the future. So I got involved with Glass Futures and British Glass probably about 10 years ago. And it came about because one day we were having a tour of the glass facility in Cheshire. And one of the guys there said to me, I just can't believe I can't get some of the customers to uptake this opportunity to make glass with biofuels and reduce the carbon footprint. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, none of the glass makers want to do it. And I said, but what about us? And he went, well, you've very large furnaces and this would be a big, big thing. You know, I thought some of the smaller players with smaller furnaces would be more interested. I said, well, here, let us understand more about it, because our customers, being the brand owners, are pushing us as to what the future looks like from a decarbonisation point of view. And our industry is slow. It's not really throwing out the answers. So let's have a look at that. The man was Dave Dalton. He was the CEO of British Glass. He's just received an MBE for services to the glass industry. So it's being recognised. So as part of that project then, to cut through it, what we actually did was we had government funding to do some of these trials. We took one of our furnaces in County Fermanagh, a large furnace, and we converted that furnace over to biofuel and used 100% recycled content. So we produced the first bottles in the world with 80% carbon reduction.
Wow.
It was a huge moment because the rest of the industry came out in arms and said, oh, well, that's not sustainable and you can't do that on an ongoing basis. The retailers and the brand owners were going, wow, can we have more of this? Because I think then, and even more so today, I think there was a realization that there's so much plastic that touches our food. There is a lot of studies being done that there is problems with plastic entering the body. There's plastic in the body. There's microplastics. There's contamination from bisphenol A, all these type of things. And I think there's a lot of science around that. It's not my specialist area, but I know a lot of people who are quite passionate about it. And I think there is a genuine feeling with consumers, brand owners, and retailers that glass is a the best packaging material when it comes to food contact.
Yeah.
But glass is completely inert. From a recycling point of view, you can recycle a glass bottle forever. Crush it, melt it, make another bottle. It never degrades or anything happens. So I think that understanding is there. The frustration is that people see glass as an old material. It's heavy. It uses a lot of carbon. It can be more expensive, not always. And then to transport it, it's heavy. So there's a lot of things there that people go, well, you don't want glass for those reasons. But if you flip that around and you think of the reasons you do want glass, then the conversation becomes very interesting. So glass, as I said, is completely inert. So from a health point of view, it's very, very good. Glass today can be made lighter and lighter. What happens is brand owners don't tend to want the lightest glass available because it doesn't look as big on the shelf as heavier glass bottles.
Yeah.
The wine industry, for example, has a real dichotomy with this. I spoke to a master of wines and somebody who writes in one of the very large papers in the UK recently. And her point was she loves wine in a glass bottle and doesn't want it packaged in anything else, but the industry needs to make lighter bottles. And the point to her was that, yes, well, the industry can make a bottle today just over 300 grams. Most bottles you see in the shelves are probably 400, 450 grams. But the industry doesn't want the lighter bottle because the consumer perceives it as less value for money and lower quality.
Ah.
So the issue is not with the manufacturer. The issue is
It's the perception.
the consumer's perception of value and quality. So a lot of it be done there. So this person continued to push me and she said, well, how light can you make a bottle? And I said, well, I'll make a deal with you. Whenever the industry will adapt the lightest bottle that there is today, and 70% of all bottles are this light bottle, well, then we make a lighter bottle. And I think the point landed with her that the issue wasn't with the glass makers making light bottles, the issue was with the perception of the brand. So from a health point of view, yes, glass ticks every box. From a weight point of view, we can do a lot more than we're doing today. And from a sustainability point of view, when you look at CO2 footprint, I mean, there's been huge strides made. I work with a glass company in California, and we have done a lot of work on looking at electric melting for glass.
Okay.
There is a furnace in Germany, part funded by the European Union, that is running with 70% electricity. So that means it's heavily decarbonized. So the answers are there, Izzy. There's no question. The recycled content, you can make up to easily 85, 90% glass using very little virgin material. So in some cases, I mean, we established we could do it at 100%. So you really step back then and you see, what does the container glass industry need? Well, it needs the right people to lead it. So I think my role and the role of Glass Futures is a very good one. So we can develop new ways of melting glass, new raw materials, new ways of doing it, new ways of decarbonizing. So we're on that journey. And what we need is people to understand more about the benefits of glass and to choose glass. And that's really where it sits with me. And of course, when we say glass, I tend to talk a lot about container glass, which is bottles and jars, because that's where I've spent most of my time. But in Glass Futures, we're looking at automotive glass, we're looking at fiberglass, we're looking at window panes, we're looking at secondary processes to make them stronger. I mean, there's a huge amount going on. Solar glass, for example. And one of my colleagues in the industry said the problem with glass is everybody looks through it. And I thought it was a really good way of shaping it. You know, people just kind of tend to take it for granted. But if you step back and you look at screens that we're talking on today, you look at wisdom,
Absolutely.
look at windscreens and cars, whatever it might be, glass is really everywhere and can have a great part to play in the future. Very interesting things happening. You know, Glass Futures, we ran our furnace for 7 months. And the idea is we do campaigns on the furnace. So the furnace is about 1/10 the size of a normal production furnace. So theoretically, you can develop things in the lab, but to test them properly and scale them up, you need something like Glass Futures. So we've ran trials for 7 months. So we've trialed different types of fuels. We ran a furnace on hydrogen for 2 or 3 weeks. Very, very interesting.
That's
We ran it on
interesting.
biofuels, different levels of electricity. So we've completed a lot of research there. Our next campaign we plan for later in this year is to look at different raw materials, because some of the raw materials are becoming scarce and some of the ways of making the raw materials are expensive. And there is different ways of making glass, perhaps making it stronger, perhaps melting it with lower temperatures, which reduces the CO2 and the energy content. So still a lot to unpack there. One of the really exciting things we've done in Glass Futures is create a digital twin.
Oh, okay.
So with all the learnings we have from our furnace in the first 7 months, which are quite significant, we've created a digital twin. So again, I'm not the expert in this area, but if you do a theoretical calculation and then want to test that on a computer system, normally that could take months, but the digital twin can literally do that in seconds. So it means that the next generation of furnaces, of ways of making glass and all that can be tested with digital twins, which is much faster, going quite quickly. And so a lot of really good things happening there. I still think we need to move faster. Unfortunately, UK government isn't supporting us like it used to. So Glass Futures was a lot of taxpayers' money has gone in to build the facility. We previously had a lot of benefit from innovation grants and things like that, but most of those have gone away. So we're having to make the operation much more commercial to make it survive. And really the idea with the previous government was to develop things within the foundation industry. So foundation industries being steel, cement, ceramics, chemicals, glass. And the idea was to develop new ways of manufacturing these and for the UK to be a leader in advanced materials and manufacturing. Current government is less focused on that, so we're feeling it quite a bit there. But we are a global organization. We have members all over the world. A lot of the retailers are members and a lot of the brand owners are members. So we have quite a good cohort there of people that are members within the organization. So yeah, a lot we have done, exciting times ahead, but we need to bring our industry together and push hard and extol the virtues of glass to consumers and people, and also then come up with technologies and new ways of manufacturing. Well, there's two very good examples. One example is the iPhone. So Steve Jobs was very clear with his team. He didn't want buttons on the iPhone. So Gorilla Glass, which is the screen on the iPhone today, was invented purely because Steve Jobs wanted to remove buttons and have a much different interface for consumers. And NVIDIA, just in the last weeks, has announced a partnership with one of the American glass manufacturers to start to look at using glass in data centers
Wow.
and communication between GPUs using fiber optics rather than copper, which means that you need a lot less energy, a lot less cooling, and you have faster communications. So, yeah, a lot happening there.
It's so impressive. And I just stood quiet because there's so much that you said that is so interesting. And I would like to go back to them for like just a few seconds. But I found that it's a very important distinction between sustainability is not assuming that, oh, that material is good and that is always bad. It's understanding the context and the life cycle and the reuse and the recycling, the transport, the energy and the behavior and all of that. It was fascinating when you explained all that. Like the fact that it's behavior and perception, most of a bigger stopper for us to consume differently, which I think is very relevant because I believe that education can transform that perception and we can be smarter consumers. So when we think about this conversation, it comes more mature when we think it's not glass versus other materials, but it's more like how do we use the right material in the right way with the lowest possible impact, which I find that really interesting because you have mentioned so many strategies that Future Glass is using, like from the research on the raw materials, on the how to process that. So I found it very, very interesting. And as you said, like glass making is so energy intensive and the furnaces they need very, very high temperatures. And historically, it has been making decarbonization very difficult. So the way you mentioned that you are looking into finding ways to change that, I just find it fascinating. And it sounds like it's making the industrial scale trials very important because the way you are exploring all these other avenues to get to the results that we all need, it stands out to me that innovation is not like launching an app or changing a small process. It's dealing with major infrastructure and risks and capital investment and supply chains. There's a lot of things and quality requirements. So the industrial innovation is not just courage, but it needs evidence. And what you're doing is gathering all that evidence that you can bring to the decision makers and hopefully get to that. So I think that what you're doing is fantastic and is crucial. What organizations like Glass Futures is doing, I think it's very interesting that it's committing to scale. So one of the things I found interesting about your work is that sustainability is not presented as something separate from business performance. So I wonder, how do you convince manufacturers that sustainability is not just a cost or compliance burden, but is a strategic opportunity?
Good question. Yeah, I mean, governments have a huge part to play here. And governments right across Europe, at least, sorry, I'll include North America as well, really don't know what to do here. So you take glass or other materials, what is the best way, to your point, to use them? What's the best way to manufacture them? How you encourage the right behaviors, which is huge. So for glass, you can take a bottle, add liquid to it, put it on the shelf. Somebody buys it, they consume it. What do they do post-consumer? That's a big, big question, because all the different areas in the UK and Ireland have different ways of collecting that glass and dealing with it. Um, how do you process it? How do you turn it back into a raw material? And how do the economics work within that? So that's a big challenge. I think consumers like convenience, okay? But if you explain to them, educate them, and put the systems in place, I think the behavior will be okay. But we have governments and local authorities making different decisions within the UK and Ireland, which is just crazy. So in many parts where I live, you take your glass and other materials and you put them in one bin, they're commingled. Other parts of the country, you put them into separate bins. In our Republic of Ireland, you're not allowed to put them in bins at all. You have to bring them to a bottle bank. So there's two countries that are generally aligned on most things, but yet completely different ways of doing it. So governments have a huge part to play here. There's recently been a tax brought into the UK called an extended producer responsibility tax. And the idea of this tax is that brand owners will be encouraged to use the right materials and do the right things with those materials. But this tax is based on weight. So glass is being hugely disadvantaged. So the glass factories with idling capacity, we see people buying aluminium and PET rather than glass. And that's, in my opinion, completely wrong. But that's a decision which happened quickly. Glass industry wasn't allowed to really lobby or influence on it and was implemented very quickly. There's quite a bit of money being raised by this system, but the money is going to local authorities who badly need the money, but they're then using this money for, I don't know, roads or schools or whatever they need to do, which is fine, that they need money and help in those areas. But this is not doing anything to improve the glass industry or the recycling or the reuse or whatever. You talk then, I mean, reuse is an opportunity as well. You know, you go back to the days many decades ago where people used to pay a deposit on a bottle, they would bring it back, that bottle would be then cleaned and reused again. And that still happens in certain parts of the world. So there's a lot of confusion. I had a call yesterday with FEBE, which is the European organization who represent glass in Brussels and represent the European industry. And they're seeing similar things happening in Europe, that different member states are doing different things with their recycling. You go to the US then, and the US, I mean, really don't have any policies or are not doing anything separating materials, recycling them, and reusing that raw material in most states. The company I'm involved with in California has built its own glass recycling plant, which is quite unusual, and doing the right things there. But beyond that, some of the other states where I've spoken to people, they're saying, the governor is saying, yeah, it's good to recycle, but it's not a focus for us. So the world is not in the right space when it comes to consumer packaging and using consumer packaging in the right way. So a lot of challenges there, Izzy, no doubt. I think if you go back maybe to the manufacturing process for a moment, I mean, the areas then that aren't being considered today but can add a lot or aren't being considered fully is around robotics, AI. I talked about digital twin, for example, optics and all of that. I mean, we can produce glass factories with a lot less human intervention. So instead of operators, you have technicians and you people supervising the process. So I think with the right engagement, we can do a lot in all of the glass sectors and improve it. But the big thing for me is we need to be able to influence government, and government need to listen and do things that are going to enable the kind of investment and consumer choices that we need to really, I suppose, in some ways protect this material, because the investment cycles are very long in glass factories. So if you build one today, you're not going to implement new technology for probably 15 years. And if you close one today simply because there isn't enough volume in the marketplace, it almost never will open again. So it's a very challenging scene as well. But I think hopefully I'm answering your point. But big thing is how we influence government and get government to make good decisions to support good materials and good operations. And then the glass industry has to respond and invest and do the right things, which it can, and I believe it will in the right circumstances.
That sounds amazing. And I just wonder, how can we, as a whole, balance the short-term commercial pressure with long-term transformation?
Yeah, that's a very difficult space, because as a consumer based with choices on the shelf, we would like to think people will make responsible choices. But for them, what is responsible choices? That's a question. But the second point then is the cost. So everybody's feeling a cost living crisis at the moment. So Tesco in particular are very good at calculating what everything costs per litre in each packaging and in each size. So people make a lot of choices, I think, based on that. So again, we come back to where is the inherent cost in the industry. So industries in the UK in particular are not being well supported because energy costs are very, very high, and that's driving cost of all materials up. So I think there's a lot government hasn't done there. If we take when the Ukraine war started, energy security was huge. Energy cost was a massive issue for everybody. But how much further on are we today, I would ask? There's a difficult but a very important balance to be got. Does the UK, for example, use more of its oil and gas resources? And by doing that, lower the cost of manufacturing and encourage then companies to invest in the right way. So we take this, what I would call as an opportunity today. So today we have very high energy prices. Energy security is less of an issue, but it's still an issue. Should government's approach not be to utilize the assets that we have, i.e. oil and gas, and do that in such a way that we reduce costs, but we get investment in the right ways for the future? Simply saying that we cover all the roofs in the country with solar panels and we create wind turbines and put them around, and then we'll create batteries and it'll all work. It won't, and we can't be naive to how much oil and gas we need to fuel things, but also to produce products that we use every day. So there's a very long-term approach needed here, and we're stuck in this cycle of short-term approaches. Uh, Ed Conway, as a reporter in Sky, has done some really good work supporting the chemical industry. And if you look at the amount of chemical production that's been lost in the UK and how that leaves us vulnerable, it's quite scary. He's raised a lot of awareness and he's brought a lot of focus back to it. And companies like INEOS, I think, are responding to that, and government are listening to some extent. But the glass industry is very much on its own, as are other industries. So we're effectively offshoring this type of manufacturing because it's either too expensive, too dirty, or we don't have the energy for it. So that is the wrong approach. The phrase you would always hear is it's decarbonisation without deindustrialisation. And that's very, very true. Cement industry and ports of cement are just growing every year. But actually the same amount of carbon has been emitted, if not more, somewhere else. So it's not a good solution, kind of with these short-term taxes and short-term approaches.
Absolutely. And I think that instead of asking what will cost us, we need to ask what value could this unlock? And it could be a lower energy use or a stronger customer relationship, access to funding or lower risk or better talent attraction, or like there's so many other things that we could be looking into for a stronger position for future markets, not just in the glass industry, but pretty much in every industry. And that's a very different conversation. So one of the things I really like about Glass Future is that it's built around collaboration between the industry, the academia, the government, the technology partners, in sectors where companies are often competitors. How do you create the trust that needs to exist to collaborate?
It's a challenge. And the CEO of Glass Futures, he's come from Siemens. He has a lot of experience in other industries, advanced manufacturing. And he would say that the glass industry is quite challenged in this area that it is difficult to get the collaboration. But again, it's what is the environment we want to create here? And what I mean is consumers will make choices based on education and price. So we got to get that piece right. And then manufacturers will make decisions on location, they'll make decisions on investments based on markets, based on energy costs, labor availability, labor costs, all of that. We need to get those things right. And I think if those things are better, then the industries will naturally collaborate. So if we go back to when Glass Futures first started on the journey, it was previous governments, it was a number of previous governments because this has gone on for 10 years now. But every government was very clear that we needed to protect industry, we need to advance industry, and we need the collaboration. And out of that collaboration comes innovation and the things that industry needs. So Glass Futures is very much in that space, and we talk with that voice. Probably some of our best support that we get from industry is from other parts of the world, not necessarily North America or Europe. So that's quite interesting to see that new entrants and growing markets are probably more open to collaboration. But here, that's why we're here. And that's what we work on every day. That's all the messaging that we bring is about how we can improve our industry.
We would love to see more government play in enabling that collaboration. I think that would be it's a key aspect that it perhaps is missing.
Totally, totally. I mean, in industries and companies, they will naturally look at what's in front of them. I mean, that's government's job, in my opinion, to create policies, to create ecosystems and create this opportunity for everyone to grow and develop together. And I guess these things go in cycles, and we know the world has a lot of challenges at the moment. That's why we can't give up on these things. We have to
That's
keep
absolutely true.
pushing hard. Yeah, I suppose they go around and come around. But yeah, it's just having that awareness. And when industry doesn't develop in certain sectors, other sectors take over, and it's very hard to reverse that. And it's interesting. I mean, people are very focused on EVs at the moment and what's happening there. But some of the first cars ever made were EVs, and then we went away from that terribly, and we've come back. And I kind of see similarities with the glass industry there. You know, that's
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I remember when I was growing up, the Coca-Cola lorry would come and drop your bottles and pick them up and just bring them back again. Like you would just buy. I suppose there's some other fizzy drinks in the local area that do the same, but there's different things that we can think of, like the use of jam jars or reuse things for lots of things like that. That was common, and now it's seen like, why would you do that? And when you can have disposable things, so to me, it's very weird. That wouldn't be very natural to me, but I still see that there's people who choose disposable over reusables. But anyhow, so I think that the wider picture is like we have these many problems that they need net zero, the energy transition, the circularity, the different skills, the technology adoptions, but they are not problems that only one organization can tackle. We need to work together, as you said, the consumers, the retailers, the manufacturers, the governments, the society in general. So I think it's very important that we realize that maybe the future of competitiveness is not about the protecting what we know, but it's also about knowing when to collaborate on the foundations that everybody needs. And I think that's very important. And that's what I think that Glass Future is doing, this bringing all this knowledge and work together. And I found that a lot of the conversations in terms of transformations focus on technology and digital systems and AI and data and process innovation. But in your experience, how important is the human factor, the human side of change?
well, it's everything, isn't it?
I would say it is. It's very important because I think that the technologies are there, but if people are not ready to embrace those technologies or to embrace those changes, it's what I. So, do you think that companies struggle with that adoption of new technologies, or what would you think it's in terms of the people?
I think companies can adopt new technology quite quickly if there's benefit.
Mm.
So if there's number one financial benefit, if there's environmental benefit, general sustainability benefit, I think companies will adopt quite quickly. We've seen that in huge examples all over the world. I think individuals, though, are probably slower to adapt. Again, the EV comparison, the sales of EVs in Ireland in the first quarter for the first time ever has outpaced the sales of diesel and petrol engines put together. So that's a journey that's probably taken 7, 8 years. So it does take time. We have to allow individuals who make these choices, we have to allow them time. But equally, if there is no alternative, people will change quite quickly as well. So generally speaking, people are afraid of change. People don't like change. People ask for change, but often they don't like it. So it's that thing to come around. So yeah, I think a lot of education is needed, a lot of, again, government policy, because we started driving diesel cars back in the 90s because Gordon Brown's government made a change to taxation policy. So there is ways of doing this that can make adoption faster. And of course, you have the early adopters who always want to take on the things first, and then you have the 80% in the middle that's slow to change, and then the end of the laggers who just really don't want any change. So you got to balance all those things. But yeah, I think done in the right way, you can get people to change and make a difference. I think most people do realize that there is huge implications coming with climate change. I think people generally believe that. Obviously, with America changing its administration and changing how it views sustainability and climate change, I think that has had a big knock-on effect. I can see it with some companies that are saying, yeah, well, our 2030 targets are maybe not as important as they were, or we're probably not going to achieve them. So we're pushing out to 2035, 2040. So I think there is real opportunity now for everyone to keep moving in the right direction to make the change that we need. A little less of an imperative, in my opinion, if I'm being honest. But equally, people and the companies that make the right changes now can hugely benefit, because I think this is just a cycle. It's going to come back. And we're potentially heading for a very, very hot summer this year. Again, if not the hottest that we've seen in Europe. And there will be big macro impacts here of climate change, it appears, over the next number of years in a relatively short time. So I think at some point it's all going to come back to, whoa, we got to move fast again. I think it's just slowed down a little bit at the moment, but that's when we can probably make a big difference at this point by influencing the governments, the companies, the individuals, and doing the right thing. And the people that move now will probably have an advantage in the future as well. So it's a different set of circumstances than it was probably 3, 4 years ago. There's no doubt in terms of people's perception and choices. But I think it's up to all of us that believe in it to really try and educate people and help people understand what we actually need to do to protect the world for next generations to come. I mean,
Absolutely.
it's the usual thing. I mean, people talk about the planet, and generally the planet will recover. The planet's been about for billions of years and probably will be, so it will recover in some shape or form. It's the humans on the planet and the animals on the planet that have the problems.
Exactly, mostly the animals, because we just keep seeing so many species to be disappearing from the earth, and there's so many plants as well. So there's a huge conversation. We can deviate from that and just have a 2 hour conversation or more about that. But I think that in terms of the way you are leading your life, you still have a great career, and now through Glass Futures, you're helping to shape what comes next. And I'm really passionate about that. I am following really closely what you're doing. But when you think about your legacy, what matters most to you?
That's a big question. Yeah, I don't expect to have a personal legacy. Let's put it like that. But it would be nice to think that things that I have done can make some difference. So yeah, I'm really passionate about continuous learning, about leadership, about people realizing the influence they have on other people and their environment. I think that's really important. So the things we can do to help there, and it's certainly something I focused on as an executive. I'm now a non-executive in a number of companies, and I think I brought a lot of this to these companies as well. So that's a space that I really enjoy and I like. I think probably glass industries is where I've spent my life, and probably where I will spend quite a bit of whatever career I have in front of me. And most of the businesses I'm involved in are involved directly and indirectly with glass. So there's a real common thread there. So I don't think that will change. I think probably the main point is how can we keep glass alive as a material, and how can we create an environment where people understand more about glass and companies invest in glass and keep it there? Because again, not an expert, but do we actually believe that plastics are harming us because of consumption? Do we believe that plastics are bad for the environment? David Attenborough has raised a huge awareness in the past about plastics, which has kind of dropped back again in the oceans thing. So if you look at that, you say, well, plastics, okay, there are issues there. That's a fact. I know the plastic industry is investing a lot in trying to reinvent itself. So that's positive. You look at aluminium packaging. I mean, an aluminium can has a plastic liner inside. People don't actually realize that. So again, that's something needs to change probably. And then you look at glass as a material, and I believe most people understand that glass is inert and doesn't cause problems. So I suppose if I can make a difference, let's say, rather than leave a legacy, it's around promoting the virtues of glass, finding new ways of manufacturing glass, finding new applications for glass, and working in that space. It's not something I really think much about what a legacy would look like. I just like to keep doing the right thing and pushing forward with it.
Exactly. And I love that because when we think about legacy in industry specifically, it's not about what is gets built, but is what will become possible for the people who come next. So maybe what you're doing is opening that lane for changes to even touching other industries and say, well, you haven't realized or we have not talked enough about plastic inside aluminum or the microplastics, or we need to talk about more of that and see what other alternatives we have, and glass being inert, so we can use that. It has many other uses that we could be looking into it. I found it very inspiring, to be frank, because I think that the next generation is going to inherit those factories, and they are going to inherit those decisions and the courage for the system to change. So what we are creating is an ecosystem for the future. So it's not just something very specific and very tangible, but it's more like a movement. It's just generating, is transforming. So we ask our guests this because the podcast is called Conversations with Agents of Change. From your experience, what makes someone an agent of change? Could it be their courage or their persistence or maybe their curiosity?
Yeah, I think curiosity is a huge thing. The most successful people you will see are generally not the most educated people. The influencers are not always people that have been to university and have degrees and things like this. I think it's being inquisitive is huge, and some people have it more than others. So I would always encourage people to ask questions and be inquisitive, and you find things out, and then that becomes part of who you are and what you are. Courage is certainly one. It's not easy to bring change. It's much easier not to. You make a choice on the shelf. It's going to cost you more. Are you going to pay the more? Can you afford to pay that bit more? Whatever it is. And I think it's probably very important to surround yourself with like-minded people and realize the one phrase that I've heard before, and I think it's really good. People really overestimate what they can do in a week, and they underestimate what they can do in a year. So
Absolutely.
with the right mindset and constantly making the better decisions and all of that. I'm listening to a good book at the moment about Eddie Jordan, who owned the Jordan Grand Prix team. And Eddie's mantra was, will it make the car go faster? So every decision that his team made, his challenge was, will it make the car go faster? And he built an F1 racing team out of nowhere. It was very successful with no money, and a very interesting. His way of approaching people was very straightforward. It was leadership was actually very interesting how he brought his leadership to it. But he had this one thing was, will it make the car go faster? So I think I would encourage agents of change to think about what's the one thing they challenge themselves. So whatever you do in life, as an example, do I need that beer tonight? Well, actually I do, because it's going to make me relax and I'm going to be better tomorrow for it or whatever. So you just should challenge the norms, challenge what people say and what governments say, because governments don't hang around for very long generally, so they often don't get things right. And it's to have your own personal values. So values led, purpose driven is kind of the mantra that I try to repeat to myself very often.
I love that. Because for me, what comes to me in conversations with agents of change is not always the loudest person in the room, but sometimes the person who can really hold the long term vision and sometimes just bring the right people together and keep going when the problem is very complex, which usually is very complex, and helps others to believe that change is possible. And well, in manufacturing, that feels especially important because the transition ahead It's not abstract. It is practical, it's physical, it's technical, and it's very human as well. So I think that it's really really exciting to see what's happening. And as I said before, I keep my eyes on what you guys are doing. And Adrian, thank you so much for joining me today. And this conversation has shown me that the future, not only of the glass, but the other materials or the technology, it's about collaboration, it's leadership, it's courage, it's investment, it's people, and there's system changing. So, for our listeners, I think that the key message in this is the future of manufacturing will not be shaped by technology alone. It will be shaped by the people who know how to turn innovation into impact. Thank you for listening to Conversations with Agents of Change. If these conversations made you think differently about manufacturing, sustainability, and industry transformation, please share it with someone who's working to create change in their own organization. Until next time. This podcast is produced by the Change Impact Group.